Today I am launching my kayak at the Tahquamonon Falls, Lower Falls parking lot area for visitors. It's not super commonly known, but just off of the parking area here at the Lower Falls, there is this little stairway with a nicely built wooden ramp that you can slide your canoe and kayak down so you can launch it into the Thequamonon River. The ramp looks steep and intimidating at first because I've never actually slid my kayak down one of these things. Using the ramp for my kayak was actually easier than what I anticipated. I had never done it before, and I was worried that the kayak would try to slide too fast and I would lose the kayak and it would either crash at the bottom or hit the river and take off without me. The only thing I had to do was make multiple trips up and down the steps to carry all the gear that I'm taking. I am pretty heavily loaded because I'm told this is quite a trip and that it could take me quite a while. I didn't really know what all I was in for once I launched here at the falls because I was heading all the way to Lake Superior. I had been told that this could be up to a 9-hour trip, and that's if you paddle pretty steady. And I'm in my slow-going kayak. I have a fast one that I left at home because I wanted to do some fishing and I wanted the stability of the big flat-bottom kayak. Before I actually take off and start going with the flow down the river, I can't leave the area without going over and taking a look at the actual falls to see how close I can paddle to them. I've seen only a couple videos online where people have done this, and I couldn't leave without taking advantage of this opportunity. I knew I wouldn't be able to get super close to the waterfall because I'd been here so many times before. I knew it'd get too shallow too fast, but I wasn't sure just how close I could get. So I'm going to paddle up here as close as I can get, and then I'll use my phone to get a little bit of a video to give you an idea of how far away I am from the falls, in case you ever decide to bring your kayak up here. This is only a small section of the Lower Falls here, and that's about as good of a view as I could get from down here in my kayak. So I'm going to take off on what turns out to actually really be a 9-hour float down the river. For anyone considering doing this little adventure, it's actually a really beautiful 9-hour paddle. However, you got to keep in mind it is a 9-hour paddle. I paddled like this pretty much non-stop for almost the entire 9 hours. I did stop a couple times and did some fishing, but once I realized that this was going to be such a long float, I stopped fishing altogether just so I could keep paddling. There is almost no current at all on the Tahquamonon River between the Lower Falls and Lake Superior. I was super shocked and taken back by this. I really expected that if I stopped paddling and started doing some casting, I would have current taking me the direction I wanted to go. I actually discovered the exact opposite. If I stopped fishing and started casting, the wind, even though it wasn't an incredibly windy day at all, the wind, the light breeze, was strong enough to push me against the current. And it was so bad, at one point, about 2 hours in, I even had the thought run through my head that if I just stopped paddling and did nothing but fish, I would just float right back to the Lower Falls. And I could take out there and not have to have my spotter pick me up. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm not someone to give up on an adventure easily. So, of course, I pushed on for the entire 9-hour time span. It was, like I said, absolutely beautiful. I saw numerous eagles, I saw some deer, some geese, tons of ducks, lots of variety of fish down in the water. I will note here, and I'm not going to bring it up again, that for the entire 9-hour float, I did not catch a single fish. I did have a northern pike chase my lure into the side of the kayak one time, and aside from that, I didn't have a hit or a follow or any sign of a fish that was interested in biting, but that seemed to be the trend for everybody that was out here on the water. After about 5 hours into my float, I started seeing more and more signs of human activity. At one point, I saw several different boaters and fishermen, some other kayakers, and anybody that was fishing told me the same thing, that they were not having any luck. When it comes to fishing, I don't believe that's normal for the Tahquamonon River, but I've never really fished here before, so I can't say that for sure. I believe this to be maybe White House Landing. Maybe this is what it refers to. There's a spot to pull out and a little picnic table. Maybe I'll get out and stretch my legs for a second. Definitely worth mentioning is that out here on the Thequamonon River, throughout the majority of the trip, I had little to no cell service. In random spots, I did occasionally get 1 bar of 4G. I think at one point I even got 1 bar of 5G, but it was such a weak signal that if I were to try to send a picture back home to my family, that picture would sit there and send for, it seemed like 15-20 minutes. So very, very weak signal. However, it's not impossible to get out. One thing that I did regularly do, though, I did pull up Google Maps on my phone, and that did a really good job tracking me on the river. There's not much that you can see along the way on Google Maps, except there are places like this one right here, the White House Landing, that I could use that as a marker for the distance that I was on the river. I left the kayak launch area around 8 in the morning, and it was noon before I hit White House Landing here. And if you're looking at Google Maps, if that gives you any kind of a reference, it took me 4 hours, and I wasn't even quite halfway through my paddle yet. In case anybody is wondering, the depth of the river varied tremendously down the entire stretch here. There were spots that were so deep that I couldn't see bottom, and it felt like my lure would sometimes sink 20 plus feet. And then there were spots so shallow that I could easily see bottom and hit it with my kayak paddle. There was never an area that was so shallow that I would worry about hitting it with my boat prop if I were to bring my boat here fishing, except immediately after the kayak launch at the Lower Falls. There was just one spot for maybe 30-40 feet long in length that was shallow enough that my kayak actually scraped bottom, but everywhere else aside from that was plenty deep enough to get your boat almost all the way to the falls. The other obstacle that you got to keep in mind when you're out here is the current exists, but it's just incredibly slow. And because of that, there are floating logs and floating trees and just debris floating randomly throughout the river area. It seemed that most people that are here regularly, they were well aware of this, and they sped up and down the river going way faster than I would have felt comfortable with my boat since I'm not familiar with the river. About 3 hours from the mouth of the river, I did have two conservation officers ride by on jet skis. They were really friendly. They slowed down as they went by so they didn't make a wake for me. What they didn't realize is I would have loved to have been tied up and towed just a little ways to give me a little bit of a break, paddling against the current that didn't seem to exist anywhere on the river. It wasn't until several hours later that the conservation officers went back by, and they did eventually go all the way to the mouth of the river where they put in at, and once I caught up to the mouth of the river, they were still there. So keep that in mind if you're coming out here fishing. Make sure that you have your license and you're following all the legal requirements for your water vessel out on the river. You don't really see a whole lot of buildings and man-made structure through the majority of the stretch. About 3 hours before you end the journey, you actually start to see a couple cabins here and there, and then they become a little bit more dominant along the side of the river as you get about 2 hours towards the end of your journey. Once you're about an hour away from being done with the paddle, you come up on the Rivermouth Campground that is part of the Tahquamonon Falls State Park campground. The Rivermouth Campground has two different options for camping. You have a modern campground area that has 72 different campsites laid out over 2 loops. And then you have a semi-modern campground that has 36 sites, and that's what we're seeing along the river here right now. I'm actually meeting my friend Rocky here at the campground, and we'll be staying here for a couple of days. You can see I just kayaked by a fishing pier, and you can see also right along the river here there are several different campsites. Half of the campsites are laid out here along the river, and if you're a large group, there is the option for one group site that is way down the path. We kayaked past it quite a while ago. The modern part of the campground, where the 72 sites are laid out up here, has showers and modern restrooms available, and you can hike there from the semi-modern campground. The paddle through here past the campground is the exact same as everywhere else, and there's almost no current at all. It's just like paddling across the lake. I will say, as you can probably imagine, that by now being about 8 hours into the trip, maybe a little over 8 hours, my arms are tired and feeling it. Definitely pack a lot of water or a water filter, and if you're coming out this way, definitely bring some sunblock, because without it, I would have been scorched. Hello. Is this our campsite? No kidding. Okay. So it would be super convenient to take out here. I can't. All of my stuff would come out. I mean, there's spots back there that are intended for that. But honestly, is that your vehicle there with the trunk open? Yeah. Okay. Honestly, I kind of want to go right to Lake Superior so I can say I did the whole thing. So I think I'm going to. Okay. You want to call me when you get there? Well, I might just come back. It's literally like right around the bend. Oh, okay. So. Just let me know if you need to pick you up. Okay. I gave up on fishing when I was 4 hours in and not even a quarter of the way. So, like. The shuttle driver said they've taken like huge musky divers here. Oh, some kids back there said that they caught a 40-incher. I don't know if I believe them or not necessarily, but I mean, they're in here. I just gave up on fishing because I knew, I mean, I'm on hour 8.5 right now, so I put in at 7:30 this morning. My arms are feeling it, and I'm clearly covered in sunblock because the sun's getting me too. So I've got to do it. I've got to go all the way. What's that? I don't blame you. Okay. Knowing that I was so close to the end of this adventure and feeling the burn in my arms from paddling for nearly 9 hours non-stop, I was certainly excited to be at the end of this little paddle here, and I didn't want to just quit because I was at the campground. I had to push myself to go the rest of the way to Lake Superior and the mouth of the river. just like it. Put on a show for me.